What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the DK Garage. I'm Jeremy.
And I'm Joe.
We just had a nice little 2-week break, but we're back at it, and we're trying a little bit different format for you guys this week, so we hope you enjoy it. We had a lot of fun. We talked a lot about the dirt race. That was really big because you took down a nice little tourney, nice little payout, so as a team, we're doing pretty good so far in this 7 races. We talked about where we're kind of at in the season. We go through the point standings and all that. And then, of course, we talked about Martinsville and what we think might happen. So we really hope you enjoy this episode. Like I said, give us a little comment on the new format if you like it. And without further ado, let's get into it. Man, that was a much-needed break, I think, for a lot of people this week off. I know you enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it, but back to the grind.
NASCAR is a grind, and it was nice to have a week off in between what the chaos of Bristol Dirt Race ended up being, getting rain delayed, and all the chaos that ensued. A lot of things we had never seen. A lot of things changed throughout the race. It was a lot of fun, but definitely enjoyed the time off.
Yeah, I'm sure you were enjoying it a little bit more than some others because you had a nice Bristol Dirt result, which we'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, I saw quite a few people kind of on Twitter just saying, "Man, like this was we're only 7 races in, but we kind of wanted this break. We still got 31 more to go."
It's a long race. It's a grind. That's why whenever people that aren't fans of the sport, whenever they're on the outside looking in, it's just like these guys are turning left all the time. But there's a lot more to it. And once you get into that weekly grind and you're staying with these guys, you understand that this isn't easy. And it's a process. It's a long grind. And we're in it for the long haul. We've been doing it for years now, and it's paying off, paying dividends. As you mentioned last week, was a nice win for me. I enjoyed it, and it's something that has been a long time building up. I'm glad I finally got a little slice of the pie.
This is the we've been watching and doing our own stuff with NASCAR for a while, but this is the first time we've started producing content. And I got to say, 7 weeks in, I got a little bit more respect for some of the guys, obviously the other content creators who are doing this stuff daily. Obviously, we have a little bit of, just more things going on. We don't have the ability to record that much, but it really made me appreciate what the guys at the shop do, because they get these cars ready every week, and they get a couple weeks off at the end of the year, but really they're go. And drivers get away for a little bit longer, but these teams, these pit road guys, these crew chiefs, it's a full-time job.
It is. It's a long season, like we've talked about. These guys have to be on their A game throughout the season. They're traveling all across the country. Most of the guys that are on the crew are doing it on the road because they have to unload. There's a lot of things that are happening, and not everybody takes that into consideration whenever they're just looking at it from the outside. There's just so much that goes on. There's so much throughout the season that impacts every race.
And the pressure as you get closer to the playoffs, if you don't have that win, which some of our biggest names in the sport still don't have a win, they're not guaranteed a playoff spot position right now.
Yeah, the point standings, you take a step back, we've had 7 races, like you mentioned, 7 different winners. That's impactful, huge on the playoffs. And when we're looking at all of that information, there's a lot of stuff that's still left to be played out.
So let's get into a little bit of the dirt race, because I've had a really good week so far this year, 7 weeks in. Now you've had your good week, and so did a surprising driver that we were actually both on, but we didn't expect him to perform as well as he did, and that's Daniel Suarez. I'll be honest, I've never been a big Suarez guy. Nothing against him, just not my favorite driver. But I was pulling for him hard in that dirt race. That the new team, just what it would have done to the sport, and even I think he finished 4th. So that is so huge for that team, and that's got to build his confidence. Losing those two big rides that he had with Joe Gibbs and Stuart Haas, and then having last year and equipment that was nowhere near the same, this has got to feel real good for him.
Yeah, it was fantastic to see him out front in that new team, leading the third most laps out of everybody. Just super surprising. But
Never raced dirt.
Never had raced dirt, and that team dialed in that setup perfectly for whatever scenario they had it dialed in for. And we went back and looked at our podcast from last week, and he was the key. Like we mentioned, we kind of left an Easter egg before we left for Easter that, hey, watch this guy. This could be a potential place for some smaller team to take an advantage, being that it was on dirt, and they capitalized. And he was in a big bulk of my lineups, and it paid dividends because I capitalized with last week's lineups crunch.
Almost 3K.
Yeah, it was a nice win.
So between,
not as good as yours.
Well, but as a team, because we do try to run this as a team, we give you our individual inputs, but everything that we publish, we collaborate on, and we're sitting at essentially 8,500 up based on just those 2 weeks alone. So I'm liking how we're starting the season, but it's not going to be a cakewalk. I mean, these, like you mentioned, 7 different winners in 7 races, and then some of the biggest names not having it. It's going to be a pressure cooker. But we got to give props to Logano because, well, let me back up a little bit. I don't think Suarez would have dominated quite as well as he did because Christopher Bell and Kyle Larson had made their way to the front, and they were fast. They were, I think, at the time of the incident, I think Bell was running second, and I think Larson was like 5th or 6th. Bell, being an experienced dirt racer, was trying to get a little more traction up high, just trying to get a run. And I forget who was leading at the time. I think it was Martin.
Martin Truex.
I think it was because that's a guy that really surprises both in the truck series and the Cup.
He had a great weekend.
Yeah, he's got we'll get to him in a minute. But, Bell, he lost control, and Larson had 0 place to go. And he T-boned him basically. And then, I think Chastain just comes flying in like 10 seconds later and just to finish both of them off. It was... that one hurt me because there was a few guys that had a little issues that didn't make me. LaJoy had some problems. That kind of brought my lineups down a little bit, but I was still looking good with Bell and Larson. And then once they went out, my day was basically over. And you chose to switch your lineups on Monday, and I left what I had on Sunday, and that was the difference.
Yeah, I thought just because the dirt racing experience was going to be a major factor, and the track got ruined, and everything just kind of fell apart from every angle that was advertised. So I thought I would shift gears, take a look, and just be different. It was a great week to be different. I've had success in big events like this before. Last year's All-Star race, I took down a tournament as well.
We both did really good in that week, yeah.
And so I thought this would be a prime opportunity just to be different. And with Daniel Suarez just being so cheap, it unlocked so many doors. Everybody was cheap last week. You look at some of the guys that you usually can't get for these prices, to name a few, not that they did anything, but Kyle Busch was at 8,900, Denny Hamlin was at 9,100, Chase Elliott was 8,700. So guys like that, you could really be able to fit a lot of the top drivers in your lineups that last week. And so I thought I'd just kind of sprinkle some guys throughout, have a nice little core, and it ended up paying dividends. And it's one of those deals where once you get comfortable with a certain core drivers that you think could perform, once you start sprinkling it out, you get some diversity in there like we talked about in previous weeks, and you can hit some home runs like we did this week.
Yeah, you tended to seem to fade more of the traditional dirt track guys that everyone was naming. I chose to, again, go with them. I did build lineups for the conditions on Sunday and decided to let it ride. It is what it is because, I mean, if Bell doesn't lose it there, even with some of the other things that had happened that were a little rough, I would have been fine. Probably would have been sharing some money with some people, but that's okay too. But I want to mention real quick, one thing that stood out to me was Kyle Busch. No real experience. I mean, he did do a few dirt races and some other types of cars, but he got out front quick, and he was leading. And then was it debris got in it?
It was all the mud and the cake that got built up from
overheating, and then he had to pit, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was just something that unfortunately
he went 2 laps down, I believe.
He did. Unfortunately, is something that he had to deal with because he was out front early. He had to deal with all the mud just taking it off the ground, and unfortunately, it put him down early. But yeah, like you said, he fought his way back.
Got 17th place finish. So that's going to be interesting to see if he can kind of keep that momentum. I mean, I don't know if he thinks he has momentum, but I thought he ran really good, and Martinsville is a good track for him where we're going next. So maybe that team's starting to figure something out. But yeah, we got to talk about the. I thought this was funny when you were kind of recapping your lineups to me. You thought when Martin Truex at the end, when he was like 3rd or 4th and had that flat tire and ended up finishing 19th. You thought that you were going to be screwed, but you had enough diversity that it didn't completely kill you. But I bet you there was a lot of guys that are really, really got hurt by that.
Yeah, I had a lot of exposure to Martin Truex, especially after seeing how dominant he was in the truck race. It didn't, to me, I didn't think it was 100%, hey, it's going to transfer from one series to the next. But just knowing the experience that he's able to gain from that, being up front and being able to be as dominant as he was, I thought it would lend itself well to having more overexposure. And unfortunately, he had that late last second issue and on the restart. But ultimately, I'm going to pull up my lineup here because it was a weird lineup. I had Tyler Reddick.
Yeah.
He ended up with the highest place differential of 20 spots, which was nice. Ricky Stenhouse ended up 2nd place, so that was a nice gain. Chase Elliott, he was the 2nd highest place differential from 26th spot into 10th, so that helped things. Joey Logano ultimately won, led the 2nd most laps. William Byron surprised some folks. Not really. He was there in the we talked about him last week and his iRacing win that people might be a little bit higher on him. In the tournament I won, the 50-cent entry, it was 13.7% owned was William Byron. So nice there. And then Daniel Suarez, 4th, leading all those laps, got 78 points almost. So it was a weird lineup. Diversity is key, and whenever you've got a feeling about a couple drivers, it's cheap entries. If you want to be different, that's sometimes key to taking down these big tournaments.
Yeah, I think another guy that was running really good and then just got into some trouble and then still got an 8th place finish. Ryan Blaney, he had like half of a car, I think. He had a whole panel missing off his rear of his car. I don't know how he was still driving that thing, but he looked good. It was a pretty fun event. Wasn't perfect. It did get a little dusty at times.
We got to talk about the single file restart.
I was just about to say I understand why they did it, but I just didn't really like it.
Well, it's impactful whenever you go from side by side, like a traditional restart situation is, to more of a dirt style restart, and it's done 3/4 through the race. It's one of those things you kind of take a step back, but it had to be done, I think, because they couldn't see. There was so much chaos that was going on every restart towards the back half of the race that they really did have to do something.
Yeah, and Hamlin, he busted a move after, I think it was the final stage break. Or no, I guess it's probably the end of the stage. And they had, put water down on the track, and he went up high, and he got a bunch of positions, put him in 2nd. Tried that same move again on that last restart. Just didn't do it. Everyone was surprised that he didn't go low and follow Logano and just bump him out of the way. And even Logano and his team was expecting it. So, but I thought Hamlin looked good. He's looked good every race for the most part this year. No overwhelming wow factor like we saw last year, with all those wins and just in some cases dominating, in some cases just good pit strategy or whatever. But he's been consistent. He's been really consistent. He almost got this win. And now we go into a place at Martinsville where he's won, I think you said 5 times, right? Yeah, so Denny Hamlin and that team, they're cooking right now, and it's only a matter of time before they get a win.
Yeah, he's at the top of the points without a win. If you look at it just week to week, he's been the most consistent driver performance-wise. He's there every week, and like you said, going through the data this week, 5 race wins for Denny Hamlin. That's the most of any active driver by 3. And you look at some guys that have won in the past. Jimmy Johnson most recently retired. He had 9 wins. So that's pretty crazy company.
So before we transition into the kind of where we're at this point in the season after the break, any last little final thoughts on Bristol's? We know we're going here again next year for another dirt race in the spring. They announced that live. What was your sort of final takeaways? Any drivers that we didn't talk about that you wanted to mention?
From the dirt race angle, that was fun. It was not 100% as advertised. It was still chaotic and a great race to watch because there was so much stuff that we hadn't seen before. Nobody has experienced, including a lot of those drivers. I'm excited to see them come back and improve upon it. Take what they've learned and make it better. Make it a night event. Make it under the lights. Just going to be something I think that will be more impactful, and they can have the build up even more so. I think it's going to make for a great show.
And now that teams have some it's going
to be in a new.
Now I was just about to say it's a new car, yeah. So they won't have they have the experience, but they don't have the data. So that is going to be interesting. And no one I really saw, at least right after the race and that announcement, I didn't really hear anyone kind of mentioning like, how are these new cars going to drive on dirt? Is it going to be better? Is it going to be worse?
We'll have to wait and see.
It's going to be. I'm excited for it. And if we keep cooking like we've been cooking so far this year, we might have to go to that race next year.
That'd be some fun stuff. We'll see.
I want to go to Bristol. Although I wanted to see the real Bristol, but
2022 Ts.
Yeah, we might have to make that happen. But anyway, I'm in agreement. I enjoyed the dirt race. I think it met most of my expectations, even though I didn't have much because I didn't know what to expect. But I thought they did a good job. It was entertaining. There was a few times it did get a little dusty, made it a little hard for you to see the cars, but that's dirt racing at times. So NASCAR, I think, will learn. It will be a better product next year, I'm sure. But yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad they took a chance. And for all the haters, oh well.
We're back next year.
Yeah. So, all right, let's transition a little bit and kind of recap where we're at in the season. So 7 races, 7 different winners. But Denny Hamlin, without a win, is at the top of the leaderboard, and he's got a 58-point cushion on Joey Logano. So, and that's important because at the end of the year, if you win the regular season title, you get an extra 15 playoff points, and that can be huge. And he doesn't have a ton of playoff points. It looks like he's got 3 so far. So
yeah, and as we get further into the season, we get more and more relative data that's available to us that we can really kind of take a look at and paints a better picture for us. And looking at the point system or point race or point standings and where everybody kind of stands, the biggest surprise is some of the guys that the really biggest surprise is Kevin Harvick really not being in much of the conversation and anything that we've done throughout the season too much. He's poked his head in the door a couple times, but really hasn't came to the big dance yet. He has been consistent where he is 8th in points as it ranks right now, but if the projected playoff standings came out today, he'd be 11th. So it's he's got some work to do. He's not too far back, especially with guys that are bigger letdowns, but he's the biggest name I think that hasn't got the win yet that we are looking to have a few.
I actually obviously I do agree because he won 9 races, But I think the biggest surprise is the guy who's ninth in points, and that's Chase Elliott, our defending champion. And we've been to a few tracks where he is good at, and he's had good runs, and at times has looked better than Kevin Harvick this year, but still no wins.
And it is kind of it's a weird scenario, especially seeing how fast some of his teammates have been.
Two of his teammates already got wins.
Exactly, William Byron and Kyle Larson. And Kyle Larson's been pretty dominant, and we haven't seen that yet from Chase Elliott. But I'm not too scared. That's why I'm not too concerned. I think they're going to get it dialed in.
Oh yeah.
And why it's not too surprising to me. He's still young. They're gonna get it dialed in. I think it's more surprising Kevin Harvick and all of his longevity and experience. That's where I would think that he would have a leg up and an advantage this year after coming off last year's chaos and having some of the things kind of come over from the COVID experiences and everything. It just factors into it. And I thought he'd use that to his advantage, and it just hasn't panned out.
And honestly, I'm kind of surprised you didn't say your biggest surprise this year is your champion, Kyle Busch.
Yeah.
We talked about it. He did look good at the Bristol, but before the overheating issue, obviously. And at times he's looked okay this year. I do think they are making progress, but he's still 13th in the points. Even if you chalk out the bad finish at the dirt race, which he did come back, it could have been way worse, but still, he's still not looking too great compared to some of these other guys.
Yeah, I had him winning quite a few races this year, and it's just because I thought he would have a little bit more of a fire under him. I think he does. I think they're getting better each week. I think he's getting a little bit more confidence, but it's one of those situations where you take a step back and once once he gets it dialed in, Kyle Busch is on, and you will see a couple wins typically in a few races.
Think about this. I don't think at this point in the year, I don't think anyone would say that out of all the Joe Gibbs drivers, Kyle Busch is the worst. Not saying talent-wise or anything, but his performance this year, he is 4th out of 4. And you can't argue that. Hamlin's leading the points. He has, I think, like almost all top 5s practically. I think he's got all top 10s.
Yeah, no, 6 top 10s, 6 top 5s out of 7 races. That's pretty solid.
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
Martin Truex has a win. He's dominated a couple races, or at least been really good at several races. And then Christopher Bell's already got a win. And now I would say that's where you would say, Christopher Bell's not quite as where Kyle Busch is, obviously, but hey, he's already got a win. He's locked in the playoffs, and he has looked good at several tracks. So it's time to start asking the question: is what's up with Kyle Busch?
Yeah, like I said, I think he's going to get it figured out, and once he does, you want to have a lot of Kyle Busch, and you want to have him often because he'll once he gets it figured out, he usually gets on a tear, and when he gets on a tear, watch out.
And we're going to a place where that's
very possible.
Yeah, he has been really good, especially in the spring. Anyone else kind of has stand out to you as far as the points standings go?
Well, you talked. We haven't really talked about Joey Logano and Brad Keselowski. Both those guys with Team Penske have been very, very consistent, very solid. Joey Logano obviously won last week. Brad hasn't got his win, but he has 3 top 5s and 3 top 10s. So only 1 DNF. That's not bad. And with the chaos that we've seen him pull through with the road course, being off course so often and still managing to pull out a nice finish, he's just one of those guys that's consistent. Going into this week, another track that aligns well with him. Go into some of the stats and look at some of the results from him, and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, this could be a big week for the number 2 team.
I think Team Penske as a whole this week they're aligned to be really dominant.
Oh, look at, I don't want to jump ahead too far, but I do, since you're talking about it, I'm going to pull this up. I can notice this. So Brad, Joey, and Ryan Blaney in the last 5 spring races at Martinsville, they're all in the top 5 as far as driver rating.
Wow.
3 Penske cars. That is impressive. Now, again, that's Martinsville, last 5 spring races, but still. And they're clicking right now. They're clicking. They're all looking good.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting to see how the week plays out. I'm excited. We got one less day with the race being on Saturday night, but under the lights, it'll be fun.
Yeah. All right. Before we transition, we do want to talk a little bit of just a little bit of performance. Kyle Larson is averaging 54 laps led and 34 fastest laps a race. Now, some of those are coming from one race more than the other. He, in my opinion, even though we've talked highly about several drivers, I think he's probably been the best. Do you agree with that, or do you?
Well, Denny Hamlin, in my opinion, has been the most consistent. Kyle Larson's been the most dominant. The ability to be the most dominant. He's been, when he is on point, he is fast. He's passing cars. He's passing cars efficiently. But unfortunately, he's had instances where he's spun out, where he has had pit road penalties. So he shot himself in the foot, which typically lends itself
to. He still came back.
Denny Hamlin has ran into those issues many times in the past, and this year he's not having those. And Kyle Larson has had a couple of these issues. So to me, they're right there. I have to lean Denny Hamlin a little bit more than Kyle Larson, but I completely understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, because even in those races where he's had trouble and it's skewing his points, he was, I think, more impressive than Denny Hamlin in most of those races. Even if you go to the road course, Hamlin was good. I think he finished second or something, or no, Logano did, but he was up there. I do remember that. But Larson was coming. He was on a tear.
Well,
and then he wrecked out.
If you look at how many cars Larson's passed.
Oh, wait, no. Actually, Hamlin spun him out. That's what it was. I forgot about that. That's right.
But if you look at how many cars in total, Larson's probably passed as many as almost anybody this year. And he's done it efficiently. He's done it very, very, very comfortably. You don't really have to worry about him passing through. Obviously, last week's incident on dirt. But yeah,
not his fault.
No, it was completely not his fault. But I completely understand where you're coming from, but in my opinion, Denny Hamlin has a stronger hold and the ability to finish stronger at this point. But Hamlin does have the best average running position at 5.9. So there is that. But performance-wise, he's averaging less than 15 fastest laps. So he's way off pace compared to even his teammate Martin Truex, who's averaging 23. Again, some of those are just coming from one main track, so not a perfect model, but still. And this will progress as you get more data throughout the year. As we are able to compile this, we get a better picture of how folks are doing or drivers are doing in this season, and it helps unlock so many more pieces of data and data nuggets, we like to call them, as we progress through the season. It helps us paints a better picture and helps us see a little bit more into how things could shape up.
Mm-hmm. All right. Anything last you want to say about the season so far?
I'm ready to talk about this week.
All right. So we're going to change up the format as far as the race preview just a little bit. We're not going to go and hit every driver like we normally do. We want to highlight some of the guys that we really just want to spotlight. And that way we're not throwing quite so much data. We're going to do driver by driver when we do our race day rundown. And that'll be more focused on the DraftKings perspective. And that way it's just, I think our hope is it's just a little cleaner, So, but the guy we have to talk about at Martinsville is Martin Truex, because he's got a lot of momentum and he has really been dialed in at this track.
Yeah, especially recently, he's been really dialed in. Chase Elliott won here most recently, but if you look at the 2 races before that, Martin Truex had won both of those. So He's got recent success here. He's on a tear. Unfortunately, he had just a bad finish at the end last week, but doesn't sum up at all what happened throughout the extent of that race and that weekend. I think big things could be on the horizon for Martin Truex this week, especially starting 7th. It opens the door for some place differential and some ability to get a few more additional points that way.
Are you thinking top 5, top 3, or you think looks good somewhere kind of in the race, fades back a little bit? How do you think Truex is going to kind of perform overall?
Well, he's a top 5 guy. He's one of those things, or one of the drivers that has the like we've talked about multiple times, the experience here and just the sheer ability to get around this track that we've seen over and over and over. I think it just allows him to have those fastest laps. The ability to get up front and lead some laps would be key too. Obviously, I think we see a top 5 from him easily, but it's NASCAR, so potentially, who knows?
Because if you just look at the reason why I'm kind of bringing it up is if you look at the last 6 races overall here at Martinsville, he's the top driver, at least by driver rating. When you look at the last 5 spring races, he becomes the 6th best driver according to driver rating. So he has been, but he does have a win. He did get a win here. But I believe that was last year, wasn't it? Didn't he win Martinsville last year?
Mm-hmm.
And that was in June. And we're still in April, and most of these races have been in March. So a little later in the year. But he seems to perform better here in the second race than he does in the first. That's why I'm kind of asking you, you think he's, with the momentum that his team should be carrying in, do you think it's going to lend itself to more of a fall-type performance from Martin Truex, or is it going to be a little bit more spring-like where he doesn't, from a DraftKings perspective, paying that $12,000 salary, is that a little too much for him in this spring race?
To me, this week, just knowing how well they've been dialed in, I'm on him. The information that you just presented kind of allows you to understand where you're coming from and makes you kind of look at it a second time, I guess. But honestly, that $12,000 price tag is going to scare a lot of people away. But I think just with everything that we just got done talking about, it just is too much of a too pretty for me to pass up.
Yeah, because if he does get out front, I mean, there's 500 laps, so it's easy for him to pay off that salary and still not even finish top 5 technically. That's why I'm just kind of prodding around to kind of see how you think Truex might do. A guy that I just was praising as far as his season performance, but I'm a little skeptical here. Kyle Larson, starting 19th. He's in a great spot from, again, the DraftKings perspective, but he doesn't seem to have the best history here at Martinsville. Is Kyle Larson someone that you think we need to be paying attention to this week, or is it someone we should maybe kind of fade out of our lineups? How, do you think that this will be the first time he's raced, obviously, here in this equipment? Do you think that that's enough for him to be almost a different Kyle Larson than what his stats say?
If everything goes as well as it has this season, yes. If it goes and Kyle Larson isn't comfortable with this track and has previous performance history play out in front of us, then it's not going to be as pretty as everybody would like. Because he doesn't have the greatest history here, unfortunately. And you look at some of the results from some of the previous races, and it doesn't jump out off the page. And with that price tag at 11.7, you look at our impact scores, our DK impact scores, and I'm not as high on him this week. I've got him at a 6 because of that data. Some of that's highlighted in our race guide, and it's not pretty because You want to touch on some of the stats there that you've looked at?
Well, I mean, in the spring, he hasn't been too bad. He's the last 4 for him, because he didn't race this race last year. He is the 8th best driver according to driver rating, so it's not terrible. But the problem is he has 1 top 5, so that means, but he only has 1 top 10 and 1 top 15. So he's had 1 really good race, it seems, and his average finish is 13 and a half.
And his average place differential, the average place differential over the last 6 races is 9.6. So a negative 9.6 is where he's losing almost 10 spots on average over the last 6 races here, which is very, very eye-opening.
It's over 11 in the last 4 overall, not just spring, but just overall. So it is. I think I'll have got to play probably a little bit because of the speed, like we've talked about. There's a ton of laps, and he can get out front. I mean, he wasn't the best at Vegas, but he ended up being the best. And was it Phoenix where he was out front a lot and before the incident or something? There was one track, I forget now. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. If he gets out front, he's the type of guy, he can stay out front, and he will get you a ton of points. But my biggest concern is not just the stats, because a lot of that is going to be car related. Where he's starting from, this is not an easy track to pass at. It is very technical, and he's going to be around a lot of guys that are going to be trying to move up too. And we've seen him just have issues. So
yeah, starting 19th. That's
right. I mean, if he's starting, like 10th, 11th, okay, that's you're around some really good guys, but they're also going to be good around you. You start getting back there at 19th, especially if you got some guys possibly failing tech and coming up and making their way through the field. I mean, you're going to be around some dudes that they may not cut you as much slack as maybe some of the guys up front, because they're not racing as professional. They're trying to get in the top 10 too.
Next on the list is Chase Elliott. We've talked about him a little bit already. Is going to be in an interesting spot, starting 5th. Last year's winner, later in the season, the second race of the year.
Had to win. Got him in the championship race.
That was a very exciting race, and very impactful on ultimately how the rest of his season played out. This being a track, being short, I think it could be a decent week to have a little bit more Chase Elliott, but I'm with that 5th place start, it doesn't offer a whole bunch, so it's going to be interesting.
I mean, he's the 3rd best driver in the spring, statistically, by driver rating. Out of the last 5 races, he's got 3 top 5s. So he is good here in the spring. And, I mean, he's technically, just driver rating wise, even with that amazing performance last year, he's the 6th best driver rating, according to driver rating for the fall. So spring seems to be a little bit better for him anyway. And he's got good track position. He's starting 5th. Right, 5th?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, there's some good guys right around him, Logano, things like that. But he needs this team needs a run, because they're still set up for a lot of season success. They can do it, but they need to get clicking soon, in my opinion.
And this could be a track to pick up that they need, and ultimately get a win potentially. But I'm not as confident just because he's starting 5th with the ability to pay off that price tag. Even though he has recent success, I just don't know if this is the race. Personally, I think I'm still comfortable having a decent bit of exposure, but I don't want to go overboard. I'd rather have some guys around him than where he's priced, because you look right below him at Brad Keselowski, starting 10th.
And he's good in the spring.
He's really good in the spring. You go and look at the stats, and they jump off the board at you, and he's been good here overall.
Oh, yeah.
Very good, very consistent, because one of the most surprising things I've dug up was his worst finish is 10th here since 2016, and they race here twice. So that's a lot of racing.
Well, I was just about to point out, in the last 5 spring races, he's got 5 top 10. So, yeah, that makes sense. and that's not even factoring in the fall races. So wow, that is, yeah. And yeah, I don't understand from the, again, DraftKings perspective. I don't really understand why he's not probably the most expensive guy, or at least second most, but whatever. I think that's kind of I think Brad's got to be a core play.
He's definitely a core play for me. I think we both have him at 9 as our impact score, which might be the highest one we've produced yet. Definitely in a position to pay off that price with the ability to get some place differential. If he's fast like he's been here in the spring before, the ability to lead a lot of laps, and you have some fastest laps. That's what you're looking for in those performance points.
And I believe this will be a high horsepower, low downforce track, correct?
I believe so.
Yeah, and he was amazing at several of these types of tracks last year, and that's the package we're using again for the championship race. So this is kind of in a roundabout way a tune-up race for these guys who think they'll be in the championship for. And anytime that these guys get in these cars that are harder to drive because they got more power and they don't handle as good, you see Truex, you see Brad, you start to see Chase, you start to see Kyle Busch. Not as much recently, but he's still one of those guys that this package is really good for him. And Logano is another guy who's really good at it. Hamlin is also pretty good, but he doesn't seem to be quite that same level with that package for whatever reason. At least that's my perception of him. So this has the makings of a nice Brad race in my opinion.
I agree. I think looking next to Joey Logano, his teammate who won last week like we discussed and has been fairly consistent. He's starting on the pole, has the ability to lead a lot of laps if he can take the lead initially and run away with things and be dominant. But sometimes we see Joey out front early and just, like we talked about last week, kind of fade. He was able to manage to
kind of had the reverse almost last week.
It was fun to see it come back full circle and be a little bit different. This week, I don't know 100% what to expect. Starting on the pole, I'm a little bit more leery of. There's a lot more downside, unfortunately. But if he's out leading a lot of laps and stacking up those points, it could be dominant.
You got to have, if you're going to be building lineups, you're going to want some Logano. And I even think if you're in a position to play some single bets, I think even he's a good bet there, even though he is starting first. There are other guys I would prefer, like Brad or maybe even Chase. But I think Logano, well, just Team Penske, they, like I mentioned earlier, they are dialed in here, especially in the spring. So why not? Yeah. I like Logano a lot. What are we? I think we're probably coming in a little different on Hamlin, aren't we? Just a little bit. I can't quite see all of the impact score on that side.
Yeah, I'm quite a bit higher on him. I'm at an 8, where you're at a 6.
Yeah.
You want to let people know why you're a little bit off of him?
He's just overall, except for the stats for Kyle Busch here in the spring, Toyota doesn't perform as well in the spring as they do the fall. I don't know, or Joe Gibbs, I should say. They just seem to be off. We already mentioned Truex. He's 6th compared to 1st in the fall. Let's see, where is he? Hamlin ranks out 11th out of all drivers, according to driver rating, for the spring in the last 5. Starting second, there's basically almost no upside other than the fact that he can get out front early and he has those 5 previous wins back in the day. So we know he can get around the track. So there's that upside. But if he has a Hamlin type race like he's had so far this year, where he just kind of hangs out top 5 most of the race, picks up a few fastest laps but doesn't lead very much, it's not going to be worth rostering him, in my opinion. And I even think doing a singles bet on him is kind of risky for similar reasons, because he's been consistent, but I haven't seen that Hamlin from last year yet.
And that's where I think I'm a little bit higher on him from just the sheer data that I've seen this year and the overall experience here. Sure, he's had a handful of bad races recently, and not necessarily bad races here recently, just not the strongest finishes.
Mm-hmm.
I think he can put it together, and with the way he's running throughout this year, I'm a little bit more high on him starting second. I feel more comfortable with him than Joey Logano. That's my opinion. I think with everything that you pointed out, I completely understand, but I'm considering a lot more overall history here and taking into consideration how consistent he's been. I understand if he doesn't get those performance points and those isn't dominant, yeah, he's going to have a hard time paying off that price tag. But I think this could be one of the races that allows him to kind of maybe take some older form, an older Denny Hamlin come to form.
It's possible. That's for sure. One of the reasons why I kind of downranked him a little bit for my impact is I think Brian Blaney was going to actually outperform him too. I just think Penske has looked good this year. They've all looked good at times at several races, and they've all been really good here in the spring. I think so. Here's the tough part about talking about what we're talking about right now is we don't know if any of these guys are going to fail tech. But as it stands right now, Logano's going to take the bottom. I'm sure of it. So on the initial start. So Hamlin's going to be on the outside, and he's going to have Blaney right behind him. I don't think Blaney's going to be pushing Hamlin past his teammate. I think he's going to be trying to push him out of his way so he can go either beat his teammate or get in right behind him, and they can be running up front. That's kind of how I see it playing out. And if that happens, I think Hamlin has a good, solid day from a NASCAR perspective, just getting those points. But I think he may have a tough time doing what you need him to do for your lineups. But that's where I'm coming from. But I like Blaney a lot, and I think you do too.
Yeah, Blaney's right under him on the DraftKings salary board, and he's starting fourth, so he offers a little bit more place, a couple of different more points available to him for a place differential. Mm-hmm. But he's been very consistent here. He's been good here, or good recently throughout the season as well, like we've talked about. Could shape up to be a good Ryan Blaney day, kind of like you were saying, if he can get out there early, especially.
Yeah. All right. We got to talk about the guy, Candyman, Mr. Rowdy. This has been a fantastic track for him in the past and in the spring. Starts 12th. He's got some nice PD upside. What's your gut kind of telling you as far as what we see from Kyle Busch this week? Is he Kyle Busch of old, or kind of this newer, not so Kyle Busch like form?
Well, I'm thinking if you can fit Kyle Busch in your lineups this week, to me, I'm going to go overboard on him just because.
Got to risk it for the biscuit sometimes.
You do, and I think starting 12th offers the best position out of anybody in these guys that we just talked about to rack up DraftKings points. Even from a betting angle or anything along those lines, I'm looking at Kyle Busch. I think this could be a race where it is ultimately a Kyle Busch style event where he's beating and banging and he's doing what he needs to do to get through the field and just doesn't care. I think we've seen it before. We understand the style of racing Kyle Busch is accustomed to showing everyone. This is just kind of his style of race. I think we could see a lot from him this week.
Yeah, I think I'll probably be going a little overboard on Mr. Rowdy as well. I like what I'm seeing. At least from the track history, I am concerned with what we've seen so far this year. It has been a little bit of a continuation, but he does have the new crew chief, and I think they're starting to figure a few things out, and this is a good track for him it's in a better car that anytime, even though he may not always get the finishes, and sometimes he's starting so far back, it takes him a while, but it seems like when he's in this package, he moves up. He may not dominate, but he moves up, and he's kind of in that position where you still need him to get some fast laps and laps led, and he can for sure do that here.
Well, in the spring, just the spring alone, over the last 5 races, his average finish is 5.4. But what's been really surprising is his average fastest laps is 57. Of course, it's kind of skewed towards a race or two, but you spread that out, you understand, like, he's got the ability to rack up stuff.
More impressive, in my opinion, is averaging 130 laps led over those. Yeah, there's a few races where it's probably skewed a little bit, but still. Over 130 over 5 race average, that's insane. Brad's the next best at 113, which is also insane. That's why I think we're both really high on Kyle Busch. I think a lot of people will be feeling the same, but I don't know if they're going to pull the trigger on him because I think everyone has been burned by him quite a bit.
He's burned people for 2 years now, and unfortunately, some people just completely fade Kyle Busch. Some people are all over him. I'm going to be on him a lot this week, but it can be burned. Again, I'm always going to diversify, so I'm not going to go 100% Kyle Busch by any means.
So one of the last sort of big-name guys that we want to talk about is Kevin Harvick. You mentioned earlier that he's kind of your maybe most disappointing driver this year as far as what we were kind of expecting out of him. This is a place where he's not terrible, but not overly amazing at either. They need a good run. They need some. I think that team needs some confidence boosted. So they need a good run. Do you think we're going to get that from them this week?
I'm not overly confident in it. I think I'm a little bit higher than you are just because I think they'll continue to just tweak it enough to be able to have those consistent finishes. Starting 9th, he does offer place differential 9,600. He's the cheapest out of any of these guys we just talked about. So it does offer a little bit of a discount. I think he's got the ability, especially he's no slouch here. He's okay. He's not the greatest. It's not his best track, but just his experience alone, I think, should hopefully allow him to have a good day. But I wouldn't go overboard. I'm way more comfortable with Kyle Busch. But Kevin Harvick, again, somebody that I want to have some decent exposure to, especially in GPP lineups.
Yeah, I want to talk about Matty D, but I need to pull up some stats on him. That's my guy. I know you wanted to talk about a driver that's maybe a little further down on the salary. Who were you wanting to spotlight?
I was looking at Austin Dillon, and it's not from a good spotlight, unfortunately. It's somebody I want to caution folks towards. He's starting 18th. He's been really good this year. We both have been pretty surprised about how consistent they've been, and he's been pretty up there on the when we do the slate breakdowns the day after everything. He's been fairly consistent in that 5x range. This week, starting 18th, he looks like he could offer some place differential, but diving into all the data, his average finishing position here over the last 6 races is 25.5. Not that great. This isn't his style of race, like his style of track. I think he could be a little bit better than that this year. Maybe
team seems to be running a little bit better.
I still think getting a top 16, top 17 would be well within his wheelhouse, but it doesn't pay off that price tag. I think, unfortunately, to me, I'm just cautioning people away from Austin Dillon.
Yeah, there's really no disagreement here. I think, if anything, when we were kind of going through everything, I may have been talking him up just a little bit more based on what he's done this season, but I don't like Austin Dillon in this spot. I think it's tough. But was there anything else you wanted to say about him? I did get some of the information I wanted. So as people go through a pretty large sampling of prior races here at Martinsville, someone that will not look very good on the stat sheet is Matty D. Unless you look at what he did last year in this car. Because if anyone has been watching the sport at all, they know Matty D has been in pretty bad equipment for most of his career. But he's made the most of it, and he's worked his way up to much better equipment, and it's paid off. He's about the eighth last year in the last 2 races here. He was the 8th best driver. He averaged an 8.5 finishing position. That's a 7th and a 10th. And his average start was 15.5.
And he's starting 22nd this week.
So he's got a lot of PD upside. We know he's good at Bristol. He almost won that race a few years ago in lesser equipment. So he's good at short tracks. He's good at this in this package. I think Matty D's. I like him in this spot a lot. He's one of my favorite drivers this week. I think he can really perform and help your lineups out. I think he's potentially even worthy of a nice top 10, maybe top 5. I don't know. But I really think, unless he obviously gets in some other, because he's kind of in that position where we talked about with Kyle Larson. There's a lot of guys around him that are going to be trying to hold their position, not lose spots, move up. So he can get some damage, and that will really affect him. But they're still a team that they need some good runs because they're still in the hole points-wise from the very poor start to the season. I think Matty D is one of the better plays as far as, lower in the salary range.
Yeah, there's a lot more drivers that are available to us, but this week we talked about, kind of changing it up.
Changing it up a little bit.
We want to run down through our race day rundown, which we put out the morning of the race. This week it happens to be on Saturday. Typically it's on Sunday, but we're going to have to adapt. We've got full-time jobs and things that we have to do to survive, just like everybody else, and so we think that we're mixing it up might be good, and we want to have people's opinion and see if there's things that you didn't like about it, things that you want to see. We love the opinions.
Yeah, we'd like some feedback, because we just want to polish this up. I think I like this new little style we're experimenting with this week. I think there's some areas we can polish up on for sure, but that's what we try to do every week. So I liked it. Any last little things about Martinsville you maybe wanted to say? If not, let's put a little bow tie on this episode.
Yeah, I'm excited to get back to some traditional racing after having a week off.
This is one of my favorite tracks, by the way.
It's going to be fun. I think it's going to be exciting. It's 500 laps. It's going to be a grind, just like the season is. We're going to wrap up our race guide. We're going to have all that available again this week. We took a break with 2 weeks ago with the dirt race because it was kind of a chaotic event, and there was so many unknowns. We didn't feel it was right to put out a race guide. This week it's back. We're going to have everything loaded up in it, and it's going to be available in the links below. So make sure you check that out to pair it with this, and then make sure to check out the race day rundown on Sunday or Saturday this time. Saturday morning.
That's going to help you really complete your lineups. Because we'll go through the list. You'll see the complete impact score, what we think of each driver. So that's really what you're going to be looking for if you're going to be going building DraftKings lineups. But we want to just kind of keep this kind of fun and like I said, try something new. So with all that being said, please give us a like, subscribe, comment, give us some suggestions. We want to hear from you guys, and give us a follow if you're listening on Spotify, and subscribe, I think, for iTunes. I don't have an Apple phone, but wherever you're listening, just give us a follow and give us a little feedback, and see you next week.
Absolutely. Take it easy.